In tonight's episode, and courtesy of the North American Dogman Project, I bring you 7 true Dogman encounters. These creatures lurk in the shadows, and they are out for blood. Lock your windows, lock your doors, and enter the alternate nightmare. August 15th, 2004. I'm probably the youngest person to come to you about this. I'm 16, grew up here in Montana, and am very active in the outdoors. When I was 4 or 5, I lived with my parents in a small town next to the highway. Our house was right next to it, and my room faced a gravel road that went into the highway. It was summer and we didn't have AC, so I would leave my window open at night so I could stay cool. One night, I woke up and noticed a silhouette standing outside my window. My eyes focused and I saw that it had a furry outline in these frost blue eyes it was using to look at me. I sat up in my bed, frightened, but I didn't feel the need to yell for my parents or anything. It just kind of stared at me. While looking at it, I saw that it had pointed ears with tufts of fur, like lynx have, and a muzzle like a German shepherd. It was fairly muscular and was almost resting on my windowsill, like it was leaning up against it. We stared at each other for a good couple of minutes. Then it smiled at me like a dog does and even tilted its head. It then backed away from my window, walked across my yard to our chain link fence, and literally stepped over it. I got out of bed to watch this thing as it got down on all fours and ran down the road and across the highway. Listening, I heard it yip and bark while on the other side, which was prairie, with a butt and then forest. It was almost like it was calling to others. Looking back on this, I feel like maybe it felt like I didn't pose a threat. Maybe it was just curious. Back then, I was just a little kid. Now I'm a lot bigger. I'm 6'7" and weigh almost 200, so I'm thinking if I saw one of these again, I probably wouldn't get the same reaction. My name is Angela. I am a 47-year-old female from Idaho Falls, Idaho. I grew up in Idaho and I am an avid animal lover, especially wolves since I was very young. I am writing to tell you about my Dogman encounter when I was around 16 or 17 years old. It would have been around 1986 or 1987. Anyway, myself, my friend Elle, and my other friend B decided one night to go into our local cemetery and look for what is called the knocking grave and the werewolf grave. We found the knocking grave and discovered that it is just a loose board which vibrates back when you knock on the grave. We never found the werewolf grave, so we just chalked it up as being a myth. We decided to go back to the car and were talking when Elle and B decided they wanted some alone time. They were a couple back then. I got out of the car and decided to walk around the cemetery by myself. It was a beautiful night with a full moon shining above. Ironic, I know. I was walking along looking at the old gravestones, thinking of how sad it is that so many people are completely forgotten after they die, when I heard a strange sound to my left. I was standing near a mausoleum, looking down into another part of the cemetery. I heard the sound again and started walking towards it. It sounded as though something was crunching on something. I stood there for a minute listening. I immediately noticed how quiet it had gotten in the cemetery, and the hair stood up on my neck and arms. Usually there is noise from cars or dogs barking, or crickets or something like that, but there was nothing. I then saw a silhouette of something big and black, standing a little ways away from me, around 25 feet away, to be exact. Something told me to back away slowly and leave now, but I ignored it. I crept closer to the creature, never taking my eyes off of it. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and I could see very well, especially with the moonlight helping light up the night. What I saw terrified me, and also piqued my curiosity. The creature first looked like a huge wolf, but the front legs and torso were abnormally large, and the back legs were huge as well. It had a long furry tail behind it just like a wolf's tail. The head was huge, and it had long pointed ears with tufts of fur at the tips, from what I could see. It was leaning down, and was eating something. The sounds I had heard was the crunching it made when it bit into whatever it was eating. I was excited because I had always wanted to see a wild wolf, and I thought that was what I was looking at. I figured that maybe a wolf had escaped the zoo, which was right next door to the cemetery, and had caught a rabbit or something. I realized, though, that the zoo didn't have a wolf in it, and hadn't had one in years. That made me even more excited and curious. I stared at the creature for about a minute or so, and then I shifted my legs to get more comfortable. I must have stepped on a twig or scuffled my feet because the creature suddenly stopped eating, looked up and turned its head my way. It then stood up on its back legs, and I heard a loud pop, and that is when I realized this was not a huge wolf. It was black and had a few brownish streaks in its fur. When it stood up, I saw its head, chest, stomach, and lower body. The shoulders and chest were massive and covered in fur that tapered down as you looked at the stomach area and legs. It reminded me of a bodybuilder on steroids because of how muscular it was. As it stood there, it started to sniff the air, and it stopped and stared my way. The eyes were a deep orange gold and seemed to glow in the moonlight. It looked at me, and I felt a fear grow deep within me that I had never felt before. I knew it saw me, and I knew I had made a huge mistake by not leaving when I first got that bad feeling. It felt as though everything went cold, and this creature could see within my soul. It stared at me for a minute, and then it opened its mouth and it bared its teeth at me as if it were smiling. The teeth were huge and yellowish white, and they looked very sharp, just right for ripping its prey apart. It never took its eyes off of me. It then lifted its arm and took a bite out of whatever it was eating. I then realized the sound I had heard was it crunching bone and tearing flesh as it ate its meal. The hands were like elongated paws, and at the end of each finger were huge black claws that gripped the leg it was eating. I stood there watching it eat for what seemed like hours when it could have only been a few minutes. He never took his eyes off of me. A fear I felt overwhelmed me. I felt sick, and I was visibly shaking, and so I did the one thing I had been taught to never do when confronted with a predator. I turned and ran as fast as I could back to the car. I didn't care. I couldn't get his eyes out of my head, and that smile. Those teeth. I could imagine it catching me and ripping me to shreds as I ran. I made it to the car, though, flung open the door and jumped in screaming for B to start the car and get us out of there. They asked me what was wrong, and I just yelled at them to go now. B looked at me and saw the terrified look on my face, so he started the car, and we left, and I never went back to that cemetery again. Later that night, I told B and L what I had seen, and they both laughed at me, told me it was just my mind playing tricks on me, which made me feel hurt that they didn't believe me. But I could hardly believe it myself. I saw a werewolf, or what is referred to as a dogman, and I will never forget it. 2013. I wasn't there, but my son-in-law, and their friend saw a dogman. My son called me all freaked out that they had seen a Bigfoot because he knows I believe in Bigfoots. Now, my son always made fun of me for believing in Bigfoots. He asked me, "Dad, can Bigfoots run on all fours?" I said, "Yes." "Why do you ask?" And he said, "Dad, we just saw one while out spotlighting rabbits." I asked him to describe what it looked like, and he said they were hunting rabbits with a spotlight, and he saw something hunched over. He said he then yelled to the others and let them know that he had seen something, and then started to shine his light on it. At first, he thought it was a large bird because it was down like it was eating something. Then, it stood up on its hind legs and spread its arms out wide, and when other two came to look at it, it dropped down and took off faster than anything they had ever seen before. He said it had a dog snout and was covered in fur, but you could see it was very muscular. My son is 6'2", and he felt it stood as tall, or taller than him. When it took off, they ran after it and watched it jump and clear a huge rock pile in one leap, like nothing. That scared them, and they all ran back to their car to get out of there. I spoke to all three, and they all had the same story and described it the same way. I told my son that's not a Bigfoot, because Bigfoots don't have dog snouts. I told him, "You saw a dogman." It's funny that this happened around a lot of cornfields. The area also had caves and was covered in sagebrush. Last winter, right after the first snow, my mother and I were driving home from Coeur d'Alene. You have to cross the train tracks twice to get to my house. After the second crossing is our neighbors that hang all kinds of crazy signs about giants in the woods, government cover-ups, and the hoodoo legend of the Howler. We've always thought these people were talking about Sasquatch. We are members of the BFRO, but we never guessed a chance for Dogman. We were passing the Looney House, and it was around 10 p.m. with clear vision. There's a bullpine tree line to my right, and a hillside to the left, and my property straight on top of the hill. My brights were on, and I remember scanning the tree line as we were passing, and about 12 feet up were two red reflected eyes, surrounded by a black mass with shoulders, no neck, and pronounced ears. My shock caused me to ditch the form, not paying attention to the road. We were high-centered for about 5 minutes. I stepped out to lock my hubs, and I remember that overwhelming feeling of being watched, which hurried my project. When I got back in the car, the feeling didn't go away. I quickly got out of the ditch and sped up the hill to the house. My mom was asking me why I was so worried, which she later found out why. About midnight, Mom was woken up by the most guttural howling you can imagine. Mom yelled at me through the house if I was awake, and I had already had my window cracked and listening to the sounds that we still hear every now and then. I then later looked for anyone who knew anything about what I saw. I then located Mr. Vic, who runs Dogman encounters on the East Coast. He gave me the best info he could, which was extremely helpful. I then armed myself with an AR-15 .45 revolver and a .380. It was the best I had at the time. I figured a guy on the phone might be full of it, and the only way to get the truth is to find it yourself. I tracked through the snow to the location I seen the eyes, and the exact tree. There were no tracks in the snow. I thought I was just seeing things and got all worked up over nothing, but then I looked up. Around 13 to 15 feet up the tree, and about 7 feet up as well were claw marks dug into the tree. I started looking for other trees, and sure enough, there was a trail of claw marks from tree to tree. Eventually, the mystery trail came to an end, and gave into another shocking trail, large enough to dwarf a lion print, were the largest dog prints I've ever seen. The trail seemed to step over large brush piles and bushes. Eventually, it led to the quad trail that follows the lower part of my property, and Hoodoo Lake. What I saw next still lies there. A deer carcass with no head, no hindquarters, and no vital organs. On closer examination, the neck bone was crumbled and shattered, surrounded by torn flesh. Both legs were broken with no bite marks, and the ribs had been separated in a pattern that indicated hyperextension. There was a lot of scuffle in the snow from coyotes, but I've never seen coyotes leave the breast meat. And back straps. What concerned me even more was, I found a leg wedged in the fork of a thin pine, about 12 feet off the ground. This tree could not support a bobcat. I've never gone back in the woods behind my house without being armed since. My neighbors now think I'm the crazy one. I dress in full combat gear when I set trail cams. I guess I am the weird one now, but I will tell you this. There is something in my woods that has the rancher across the street thinking a grizzly attacked his cows in November. Every neighbor hears the howls. I asked my landlord at the bar if he had seen or heard anything while he was living here, and his face went white as a ghost. I haven't had a sighting since, but I did have an ice ball thrown at my car, and there's no kids in this neighborhood. February 2008. I saw a dogman walking along the greenbelt in Boise, Idaho. And to be more specific, the area would be Garden City. The actual location on the greenbelt would be the area of the greenbelt that is just on the other side of Veterans Parkway Bridge. For those not familiar with the area, the Boise River flows through downtown Boise and Garden City. The greenbelt is a walking, biking pathway that is paved that goes right next to the river. It was 3:15 in the morning, in February 2008, and I was scraping the ice off of my car window. I had to be to work at 4 a.m. I realized that it was eerily quiet. I looked up, and I saw it walking along the greenbelt going towards the Veterans Parkway Bridge. The bridge goes over the Boise River, and the greenbelt pathway goes under the bridge. It was tall, I would guess over 7 feet. It turned its head and looked at me. It had green neon-colored glowing eyes. I said out loud, "Oh my God." It turned its head back and continued walking along the greenbelt. It was walking slowly. I was frozen with fear and didn't move until I saw it vanish behind the building that is next to the Veterans Parkway Bridge. It had dark brown fur all over its body, pointed ears, long snout, weird legs, a tail. I got a pretty good look at it. That section of the greenbelt is at the end of a dead-end street and has a couple of business there with parking lots that are all lit up with street lights. I only saw it that one time. Last week, though, while in my bedroom again, I heard something huge land on the ground behind my bedroom wall. That wall has no windows. I heard deep, kind of raspy breathing. I started praying, pleading the blood of Jesus over my house, grounds around it, and all. I do this most nights, but sometimes I forget. I'm awake most nights until 3 in the morning or later, due to having severe spine issues, as well as fibromyalgia. We live in a lovely manufactured home community. There are lots of trees around here, and it's very close to canals, large open fields, and woods. I know this is what I saw, but the fact that I saw it has left me amazed. Why is that, when so many are also seeing them? I guess I just thought since I am in the house most of the time, due to my health, I would never see them. The space between my neighbor's house and ours is about 10 feet. My husband went outside weeks later and measured the area by the window. That Dogman had to be at least 8 feet tall. What concerns me greatly is that no one in the police department or government will alert people to their existence. People are walking around feeling a false sense of security. I know I did. I won't even try to walk outside anymore, and yes, I have cautioned my neighbors. The ones with the security light. I can't think of any other details right now, but it's important for you to know that several years ago, a homeless woman was camping out, down by the river, here in Albany. She was found dead and her tent was really torn up. I believe the police report in the newspaper said she was torn up as well, but I honestly can't remember any of the details. To the best of my knowledge, no one was ever caught for that crime. This is a sleepy town, just over 50,000 people. We no longer get the newspaper, so I have no idea if this has happened again. I do know that a couple was down by that same area and saw a Dogman. It really frightened them badly. I heard about that on another YouTube channel. I just want people to be aware, so they don't go out at night anymore, especially near the river. But then, we're not near a river and I saw one in the middle of the night. 1997 to 98. My first encounter happened late at night, while driving home to Snohomish from Sultan, the two towns being about 10 miles apart. I was with my mother and we had just finished dropping a friend off at her home in Sultan. It was late October, and there was an unusual storm going on that night that everyone talked about the following day. Tremendous cloud-to-cloud lightning, and a very cold dry wind with no rain. Bright flashes of light, loud thunder, and lots of leaves blowing around. After dropping our friend off, we were on a stretch of the road that's very dark, with farmland on either side of the highway, and both sides having densely wooded hills. We were driving a 1991 Honda Accord, and at this one particular spot in the road, something caught my eye, off to the left side, which was a farm field, and there was a break in the guardrail for a dirt road going into the field. Right when we were even to this break, I saw what looked like a huge dog coming up, and right then, it ran in front of our car and I hit it. We could see the top of its back, which we both swear looked more like a hyena at this point than a dog. It had to be huge to see its back over the hood of the car, when you're sitting pretty low to the ground in a Honda Accord. Its fur was shaggy brown and mottled with dark spots, just like a hyena, and its front seemed higher up than its back. The headlights lit it up as it ran right in front of our car and we could feel it get hit, but didn't see it go either up in the air or off to the right side of the car. It was running from the left side of the highway to the right. We were driving westward. It sent my car into an uncontrollable swerve, back and forth into the oncoming lane, and I just prayed that I could get it under control, to keep from getting into a head-on collision with what looked like maybe a Ford Aerostar van. A calmness came over me and I felt like my guardian angel had taken control of the steering because we missed the van by just a few inches. After going a little ways further, we were both so shook up I pulled off to the side. My mother wanted to go look for the dog because we both love animals and felt bad about hitting something. But I had a bad feeling about looking for this dog because it had looked so strange and I was afraid of it. It was dark and stormy. It didn't feel safe and I just wanted to get home. We got back in the car and stopped at a little gas station when we first got into Monroe, which is the next town between our town and Sultan. We got out to look at the front of my car, thinking surely there would be some evidence of hitting something that large. We were going the highway speed when we hit it, which is 60 miles an hour. Like a dent, some fur, or blood, but there was nothing there. Not a scratch. The whole thing had a very supernatural feel to it. The look of this dog, which was huge and looked more like a hyena, just didn't seem right. Neither did the timing of it running in front of us, like it wanted to make us stop on that dark stretch of road and get out of my car, which we did, but we got right back in. I never saw it on two legs. It ran on all fours, but there was something so calculated about the way it came up to the highway and looked at our car and ran in front of it. It seemed planned. It was such a strange electromagnetic type of storm that night, too. The next day, people we knew that lived miles and miles apart in many different directions all talked about the storm, and one particularly loud thunderclap that shook everyone's homes. They thought it was directly over their house, but they were all miles apart. I have 3 more encounters which occurred after this first one. I'm pretty sure this happened October 1997, no later than 1998. April 22nd, 2016. My husband listens to your podcast regularly, and until a couple days ago, I thought he was nuts. While my encounter was not as up close and personal as many of your guests, it was nonetheless terrifying to me, and I feel that it has forever changed me in the way I view the world. I had just arrived home, a few minutes after dusk, after visiting my parents. Our location is rural, but we do have a few neighbors within shouting distance of us. We have 33 acres of mixed forests and fields, with lots of thick brush, consisting mostly of briars. I had my 2 young children with me, and the Jeep, ages 2 years old and 11 months old, when I pulled in the driveway that night. My husband was working late, with an emergency case. It was near fully dark when I arrived home. As soon as I stepped from my vehicle, I felt creeped out. It felt different outside. We have lots of peepers and crickets that would normally be making lots of noise. Even the birds are usually chirping until an hour or more past dark. This time, there was not a sound. It was very warm that evening, so the peepers should have been in full chorus. Because of my uneasy feeling, I was rushing to get the kids in the house at the same time, and did not want to leave RJ in the car alone. For a minute, as I routinely do, he and our older daughter, who was asleep, are normally too heavy for me to carry together at the same time. That night, though, I grabbed them both, one in each arm, after finding my keys to the front door and carried them both. Usually, I would use the auto garage door. However, the opener did not work. When I reached the front door, at the top of the stairs and got situated on the front porch, I put down Angelina in order to open the front door. As soon as I turned my attention back to the front door, it happened. Somewhere to my left came a sound that will be forever seared into my memory. It started low and slowly increased to a moderately loud growl. It was deep-toned and very guttural, and was angry and hateful in character. It was nothing like anything I had ever heard before, but it did sound canine in origin, especially after spending an hour listening to various animal growls. The growl continued for approximately 10 seconds. I was so terrified, I was fumbling with the keys. It really felt like I was dropped into an 80s horror film. I really did think I was going to die. I was sure any second the thing making this sound was going to pounce upon me and the kids and eat us, right on the spot. The growl sounded as though the creature was standing just off to my left. I refused to look out of fear of what I would see. It sounded so close, and at or even above eye level with me. My porch extends another 5 feet to the left, and then off the porch is the front of the house. There's 35 yards of grass to the edge of the tree line, and there's a field with 2 feet tall grass opposite that. There's also a small shed between our porch and the tree line. Standing on the front porch, from my head to the ground is approximately 9 feet. So, I assume it was standing near the corner of the house. I had never been so afraid until, a few moments later, when it actually spoke to me. As the growl continued, it seemed to melt into audible words, spoken in a very deep and gruff tone that seemed to have a rough sort of reverberation quality to them. What I heard as clear as day was, "You can't get in." The only word that I'm unsure of is the first, "you," as the sound of growl transitioned to English words, and it sounded more like he. Now I was hysterical and dropped the keys. Finally, I got the right one in and got the door open and got in. I had to kick my daughter through the door, regretfully. Strangely, she seemed oblivious to what had just transpired. as if she didn't hear it. I slammed the door shut and never looked. I didn't hear anything else that night. I called my husband and his friend to let them know what happened. So, I never did actually see what terrorized me, because I couldn't look. I've had 2 days to think about this encounter and talk with my husband, who has listened to every episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm fairly certain that this was what was growling at me. The sound was not human and seemed like it was amped or mic'd up because it seemed so powerful. Not that it was a loud growl, but it seemed unnatural. Also, the height it seemed to emanate from and the silence that preceded it lead me to that conclusion. My husband agrees, because the entire week he too has been on edge. We have lived here for a year and all seemed normal, until this week. Our cat, which is an indoor cat, got out accidentally and has vanished without a trace. She has gotten out before and just stood around until we got her back in the house. Also, my husband said Tuesday night he experienced the silence outside and it really unnerved him too. He says he has never experienced anything so eerie. On Wednesday, he took our dog up into the woods to look for our cat and felt very uneasy. He said the dog kept tucking its tail and turning around, wanting to go home. It's not like our dog or my husband to feel uneasy in the woods, because both of them love the outdoors and are very comfortable in nature. On Thursday, at dusk, he took the dog around the back lot and says something took off from the thickets at a sprint and came crashing through the woods, down the hill, towards him. He always carries a sidearm when he is out and is normally not afraid of anything, but he actually turned and ran back up towards the house. Whatever was charging stopped seconds after he stopped to listen and did not make another sound. He was very concerned when he came in, stating that he knows what big game sounds like and that this was just not right. Even he was surprised that he ran from the sound. The following day was when my encounter happened. After talking about all of these events with my husband, we are concerned that there is a dogman in the area. My husband listened to episodes 90 and 91 and is so worried that this thing has decided to stalk one, or both of our kids. My husband said that based on those episodes, it sounds like the dogman plans ahead when snatching kids, and he thinks it may have been scouting the area, with plans to do just that. He said it was doing that, or that it was waiting for me to leave one of the kids in the Jeep for a minute. Either way, none of this is good. The main reason why I wanted to submit this was because it seems very unique, and that it spoke to me. It wasn't the words, but the feeling it gave me that disturbed me most. It was as if it was trying to give me the impression that I was nothing and that I was weak, and just food. I got the impression that it was saying, "Can't get in," like "ha-ha, you're mine." It's hard to explain, because it seemed like it was conveying its frame of mind and that it was, for lack of a better description, making fun of me in a very cruel way. I really want to know if you have ever heard of one of these monsters actually speaking. My husband and I really want to believe that our conclusions are wrong, but instinct and your show have us highly convinced that it in fact was a dogman. We thank you deeply for keeping the show going, being informed, and not leading us to believe that the monster is probably literally hiding out and waiting for us. That just might save one or all of our lives. Thank you for all that you do. Please let us know what you think about all of this.